whose ancestral lands are on which we meet here today. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of Aboriginal people to country and pay our respects to elders past and present. We also extend that respect to all First Nation people. Thank you, councillors. Apologies, none. So we have Councillor Hill.
Yes, I can hear you.
We have our Chairman of Audit Risk Committee, Michelle Bennett. Hello, Michelle, you're up there on the Zoom screen.
Hello.
You're up there too. Welcome, probably for the first formal meetings I've been at. James Rendell sitting down in the vacant councillor position. No. Accountant position, you're on camera, so it's all fine. And Matt James over here is new roads and infrastructure, I think is the word, director. So welcome to everyone. I seek leave of the meeting to change the agenda a little bit. We'd like to bring the item 3, the annual business and plan and budget draft, forward to be the first item if we can, please. Anyone got any objection? Okay. So we'll do that first. Item 3 for agenda, is that right?
4.
Item 4, is it? Item 4, I think. Fine. 4 on the agenda, please. Number 4. There is a recommendation. Do we seek to have an explanation before that, please?
We've got Michelle Bennett on. This came to the Audit and Risk Committee on last week, for those of you who were there, and Michelle had some comments around the wording that we have changed in the this version of it for your consideration. And Michelle just wants to give an overview of where she sees the actual business plan. Is that correct, Michelle?
That's correct, and to ask, I guess, answer any questions as well in regards to the things that came up in the Audit and Risk Committee meeting.
I'll give the floor to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Matt. I guess as chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, I did put up a motion, which I normally don't do. And the councillors present at the meeting thought it would be wise for me to attend the council meeting that was looking at the business plan, just to say why those items were raised. And you'll see them when, I guess, the minutes come to the council in regards to that audit and risk meeting. So I'll just quickly go through the motion that we did put forward. The first was that there was to be something included under funding of the annual business plan that further detailed council's new rating policy. I guess from my point of view, I was trying to make sure that the council was communicating to your community that there had been a shift in the rating policy and that may affect both categories of land use, of the ratepayers' land use categories, and individual ratepayers, and that effect was mainly the change in the fixed charge. And just looking at my paperwork, that change in the fixed charge does change the rate burden between value of properties, and it will change it from low value to high value properties. So I guess to have that communicated within the business plan. The second item that I did raise, and there are a number of dot points here, was one, there was just I guess a heading change, but it was about providing some average rate information. Now, unfortunately, discussions with your finance manager has highlighted that the current setup of your rating system doesn't allow you to provide a lot of information in regards to that shift of fixed rate to your, I guess, increased use of the ad valorem rate charge. And so because we couldn't do that in different ways, it was put forward, it was probably better to show it through average rate information. So really disclosing what the effect will be on the average rate payer for each of your land use categories. So if we look at what the average rate is for the residential, the average rate of the primary production, and those other industrial and the other land use categories. And again, this is about providing transparency to your ratepayer and telling them exactly what will be the effect of those decisions that council has made in regards to the rating policy. And it is also because, like the majority of councils in rural South Australia, there have been some large valuation increases in the primary production area as well over all other land use categories. So you sort of have this double fold effect of having a change in the fixed rate, a rate increase, even though it's, I guess, a comparable rate increase to other councils. And you have, and I can't remember what the first one was, but it's, the change in the fixed rate and also that increase in valuation, as well as the general rate increase. So that combination of three really needs to be communicated to your ratepayers of the effect on them. And so I think already from the new version of the business plan, I've seen that average rate information being shown in the table, which is good to see. And I've also suggested that you may want to consider looking at the rate burden across different land use categories so that you understand, I guess, which categories of ratepayers are wearing the burden of the overall rates. And finally, more generalised, not just on the rate side of things, we did include and move in the motion that now that the council has moved away from its long-term financial plan with this annual business plan, there's a lot of changes that it is imperative that council does quite a robust review of its long-term financial plan. And my understanding is also the council is seeking to finalise asset management plans soon as well. And your current asset management plans are old. That council really has to move on those asset management plans and get its long-term financial plan in place that this annual business plan sort of would support. So I'm happy to take any questions from councillors in regards to that motion that we did pass as well. So,
Councillors, any questions to Michelle or to up here?
Just on with the asset management plans, James, we've got a timetable already, haven't we, for when they'll be completed? Do you just want to?
Matt.
Oh,
I'm James.
sorry, Matt.
I did it the other day.
I'm so sorry.
It is somewhat challenging.
Yeah, sorry, Matt.
Through your chair, the intent is to develop a robust plant and fleet asset management plan in the next 3 months. I have finished by September, so it'll go to the water committee in October. And a roads and associated roads infrastructure asset management plan at the same time, so they both can go to water, wastewater, and water supply asset management plans for November, December, which then feed into the process for 2023.
Councillor Qualman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad the asset management issue or title or item has been raised because I had some concerns where it is and about time we visited, and as the auditor said, that it's a bit old, and I've had a few inquiries from the community how we're maintaining our roads especially, so this would be a good project to get up and running and see where we're at. Sustainability. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Bland, I cut you back a bit, I think.
No, that's fine. I just time frame slipping. That's a large amount to bite off in a very short time. So very excited.
Your microphone. Tracy won't hear you.
Basically, I'm very excited if we get all that done by November. Sounds good.
Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Mayor. There was mention of the long-term financial plan there, so I'm curious to know more about, apart from the fact that it needs to be reviewed on a regular basis, is there anything specific in the long-term financial plan which has been noticed?
Want to have a go at that, Michelle?
Thank you, through the Mayor. I guess it's nothing there specific, but there is a number of large items across expenditure asset renewal, new assets. And I know that, most councils are getting money thrown at them to reinvigorate the economy. But yeah, I think if you look at your long-term financial plan at the moment and compare this annual business plan, it doesn't have a lot in common. And of course, it is also because it is based on outdated asset management plans, because that is probably the component that adds the most to the long-term financial plan. And also with the rating strategies, the fact that you didn't have a rate increase last year, and now the rating strategies that you're taking, I think there's some adjustments to CWMS in getting forecast recovery on your CWMS side of things as well. All of that really isn't in that long-term financial plan. And I also noticed previously the long-term financial plan was very, very high level. And now that I guess you do have additional finance people in place, that you do have asset management plans moving forward, that long-term financial plan would be a lot more detailed in regards to council's philosophy going forwards, and what the roadmap is for the next 10 years.
Thanks. Councillor Arthur.
I'd just like to ask one question. Does it worry you that the council now do not do whole of life plans for capital works? It was a motion passed just recently for two rather large projects that we wouldn't do any whole of life planning for them. Now, that is essential. Going back to 2014, the auditor at the time was telling us we were running into trouble because of the capital works we were doing. Do you think that's a good thing to be doing?
Through the chair, I think whole of life or long-term asset planning is definitely important. Councils, especially at a time when they are asked to put a lot of infrastructure in place to fund and improve and get economic stimulus going, are often put into the trap of putting new assets in and then not being able to afford them in the long run. Any new assets are service increases and ultimately will require rate increases to service and repair them in the future. So I would always advocate that there is a whole of life costing done at the time of making decisions in regards to new projects and new endeavours and large infrastructure outgoings.
So I'm advised that our prudential management process can pick that up, or should pick that up.
It does pick it up. This was adopted in April this year, and it very clearly states about whole of life requirements.
Any new asset over and above replacement of existing asset. Not necessarily replacement of asset, but new asset.
Mr. Mayor, we did have a policy saying we were supposed to do it, but the staff didn't do it. And on a request, it was a motion from me, the whole of life on the Meningie Jetty, $500,000 job, and the walking trail, $500,000 job. And it was voted by the members not to do a whole of life plan. It's in the minutes.
Be the case, but the prudential policy sits alongside or underneath or above that, councillor. I'm aware that the councillors on that day did not support your motion.
Just through you, Mayor, with the long-term financial plan, Michelle is correct. Our plan is very high level. Generally, you try to build them from the bottom up in some way, because our asset management plans are old and need replacing. So all of them feed into each other. So we're working with what we've got, but the long-term financial plan, as you know, it will have a lot more layers to it within the next 12 months. It's not a quick process, but we need to do the asset management plans first, and then we need to start to build it up and understand what our costs are. And it goes to Councillor Arthur's question as well, what we need to do over the next 10 years. Now, whether it's build a new asset and what those associated costs are, but at the moment, it's really a high-level document that was probably a best guess at some point. So we need to really reconstruct it completely.
Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Yench.
Through you, Mayor. So the long-term financial plan was indeed a best guess, or was indeed a guess. When will it come to the council? I don't think the revised version, there has been a revised version which is kind of come to the council. So whilst we're supposed to see any updates, what's the frequency of the updates to the long-term financial plan?
annually, after the budget's been set, within a timeframe. So given that we've got a lot of work to do, it would be pointless to bring it back when at least the bulk of the asset plans have updated. Then, so we probably will do it in 2 stages. We'll have the asset plans updated and to the audit committee by the end of this year. Then we'll have a interim long-term financial plan. And then by March of next year, we should have now, as I said, not a quick process, but by March of next year, we'll have a long-term financial plan that reflects a lot more information than it does now. And that will be ready then for the next budgeting.
Okay, so, I'm really pleased to hear that, because the lack of detail there's been a lack of detail for a large number of years, and it will be nice to see all of the plans forming one whole, so that you to then understand how we go from raising a rate to what we see happening in the next 10 years. Thank you.
Agree. And once the thing that will complement that, the synergy system, the new system, will also have a lot more detail than we've been able to gain before, and that's not new information for you. So it's really a whole combination of things that should come together over the next 12 months to make sure our long-term financial plan is as robust as it can be.
Councillor Yench.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I think the annual business plan and budget are extremely optimistic, and it's good to be optimistic, putting one's best foot forward. I do have some concerns, particularly with CWMS, and I know these things are going to be picked up, but CWMS, particularly at Wellington East, is a landmine waiting for council. And we do need to be looking at some of these things more in depth. They are going to maybe not affect this coming year's budget, but they will catch this council before the end of term, I believe. The other aspect, and I will reiterate I'm not happy with the way the rate structure has taken place and the rise within primary industry. I know we have accepted that and it's gone through, but I still voice my concern that the primary producers that have been and continue to do the heavy lifting, and they will be asked to do more. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, you'd like to add something, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to just add back on the previous comment with the discussion on the long-term financial plan. I do work with a lot of councils with their long-term financial plans and audit committees. The councils that seem to do it best do quite a complete review of their long-term financial plan, usually with their strategic plans and their asset management plan. So you see a major new long-term financial plan come out of that. Then what happens is, at the same time as reviewing annual business plans, the long-term financial plan is actually done at the same time. Now, I know the legislation says you must review it within a certain period after the annual business plan has been adopted, but councils that do it at the same time show that they're actually contemplating the long-term effects of the decisions they're making in a current annual business plan. So they can see the effect of the rate increase today and the compounding effect in year 5 or 6, as well as, you know, those major infrastructure decisions that where they're doing quite a large infrastructure project, the increase in expenditure over year 4 and 5 and those sorts of things. So that is a very good practice to get into, and hopefully the council will be situated once it does that first really big review of its long-term financial plan to do that going forward.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
My question
Councillor Arthur. Yep.
is the absolute inaccuracy of our long-term financial plan as it's been over the years. It's never, ever looked, you've got a 10-year plan, and I'll just quote some figures here. This is the 2019 to 2029 figures. In 2019, we were running a $2.2 million deficit. In 2020, $1.9 million deficit. In 2021, $1.7 million deficit. 22, 1.59, and it goes right on for the next 10 years of running a deficit every year. Now, that was just unsustainable. It was, I think we had words about that. The next one changed, so last year and this year that on the financial plan, we were actually running at a surplus, which never happened. But, you know, like, there's got to be some credibility in your long-term financial plan where, in my opinion, I know what you think, you should exclude grants until you've got them. You know, we know we get road to royalties grants and all those. So they're the only ones that should be put into your budget, your long-term financial plan. The ones you know you're going to get every year. And everything else should be budgeted differently because they are extras. We can either do them or contractors do them or whatever. The basic, what the rates are paid for is what they should be expending.
So, Michelle, can I ask you a question around that? Given, I suppose, in this process this year, we received the reinstatement of special local roads, whatever it is, the South Australian little one, that sort of changed our dynamics a bit. How do you believe we should take account of that, or should we build that into the budget as we see it, or exclude it, treat it as an additional?
Thank you. Yeah, I understand exactly what you're talking about. And recently I had to review for the LGFA all councils' long-term financial plans and annual business plans. And this is a major concern about these grant revenues and how it does make councils look better. Or what I would always say to council is make sure you understand what your ongoing current operations look like and whether that is working at a small operating surplus. That is the perfect position for a council, and those ups and downs of specific one-off revenues of grants should be out of that equation. Now, I know the reporting is set up that we include them, but council can always add other information in its long-term financial plan and business plans to say without those grants, this is where we would be. And I think that is the perfect position, small operating surplus with ongoing grant revenue. So FAGs, rates to recovery, possibly as long as we know that they're going forward on an ongoing basis, but take them out as soon as they're any question. And really, a council would probably want to be self-sufficient and not have to rely on that. And it is a bonus allowing them to therefore utilise funds for other things. So definitely agree, council needs to get a handle of where it is without those amounts.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Roundtree.
Just 100% supporting what Councillor Arthur is saying. We need to be able to see how we're tracking without that extra finance in there. And also, I think what's been frustrating from the long-term financial plan, from my perspective, is it's like we set these budgets and we set this plan going forward, and when you look back at the old ones, we very rarely hit those targets. And I don't know if we fully understand or ever have it explained why we're not hitting those targets one way or the other. So you sort of feel like you put a lot of effort in to doing these plans and reviewing these plans, but then they're sort of, you know, so it's a wish list. They don't seem to ever be held accountable for that information. And I think that's important because otherwise I feel like we just do a lot of work and we're not really steering in a particular way. We're not getting reasons why we're not achieving those goals. And I think we need to, because it's not certainly not gelling. And I actually don't like looking at the document because it's just like, well, meh, what does it matter? Like the annual one's more important. So really we've got a series of annual plans. And once we get past 12 months, it's really like a wish list it is the plan. But I don't understand why we do a 10-year one when really so many things change, sometimes out of our control, when it's actually just that annual plan that's the most important one that we do.
I'm coming to you in a sec, James. I think it'd be fair to say our systems haven't been good enough to give us good enough figures to build good long plans.
Yeah,
I
perhaps.
think we're still 6, 8, 10 months away from that time. Michelle, you want to add to this?
Just to support that, the councillor's view, yes, I agree 10 years is a long way out. Would suggest concentrating that council really creates a robust, that first 4 years to make sure that you can really, hit those numbers. 1 year is unfortunate, has too many timing issues. And we see, and you'll see things like carryovers and those sorts of things. We want to try to take those effects out and allow management to deliver their projects. And 1 year cycles don't really work that well. So definitely I'd say try to really get that first 4 years. You are like every council. Some councils do it on purpose. They'll put whatever they want in their long-term financial plan, But then when it comes down to the crux that annual business plan are unwilling to make political decisions of rate increases to fund those things, and therefore still continue into deficit situations. So I think, yes, council definitely needs to go back and report on how well it's going. Whenever it does a business plan, it should be commenting on what that looks compared to the long-term financial plan. So it can communicate to the community why it decided not to increase rates as per the long-term financial plan, or why wages are higher than in the long-term financial plan. So always, coming back to that document as the Bible that it follows.
Okay, thanks. James, I'll give you a go, and then Councillor Taylor.
Okay. Proposal would be.
You're off. You're off,
now.
mate. You turn yourself off.
Oh, won't go back on.
Don't touch the button.
Okay. The proposal would be to make a rolling long-term financial plan. We'll wait until we can put this year's annual in them to give us a guide. And then going forward, the budget in the first could be the first year of the long-term financial plan. So if you're hitting the targets in your first year, one could say that indirectly you're monitoring against it, and your second year and third year is not going to be too far away. The next long-term financial plan will be done at a business unit activity level, and it will be built from the ground up. We need base data before we can embark on that project.
Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Mayor. So the something that is sort of both Councillor Arthur and myself are very keen on the CWMS scheme, and to see that the charge for the vacant block has reduced is progress. It was never going to work that if it was the same, charged at the same, then there was never going to be any additional income in years to come when those properties were actually built and were actually connected to the CWMS scheme. However, I'd like to see much more detail for the CWMS contained in the annual business plan, because we don't see where it goes. So we know this year we're raising almost 1.2 million. We know that approximately in rough terms, 50% of that goes on the actual running of the scheme. And then we've got a kind of theoretical reserve sitting, which isn't an actual reserve because we're using it for replacement, etc. But we never see what is being replaced apart from where we need to add money to it. For example, something particular goes wrong and we add something to it. So I'd like to see more detail in future around the CWMS schemes before they materialize as issues and major problems, so that we can see what's coming up and when you dig down deeply into those schemes, you can see the sort of life expectancy of the components. But that's sort of, unless you're sort of into pipe work, etc., it's kind of meaningless for the general public to understand that a pipe might last 50 or 60 years. What they want to know is when something major is predicted to fail and what that is going to mean to the council's budget going from year to year. And I'd like also to get away from, we should not, at this kind of charging level, we should not be having to pull in grant. Or I know that we're not particularly, but it's not to say that it won't happen in future to do some upgrades, for example. So the fencing could potentially be an issue moving forward. Pumping stations could be an issue moving forward. Some of that cash has to be set aside also, not just for the maintenance and running of the existing schemes, but to see if there are replacement opportunities completely different. So our townships are expected to grow, hopefully, if we get the growth planning right. How will that impact in 10% growth in the township, for example? How will that impact on the scheme? And what do to preempt that and accommodate that growth rather than playing the catch up? So And that's where we've also, there's a problem as well with how much it costs to maintain it currently. But if we add another 50 properties, for example, in Meningie, does the additional cost of charges coming into the council cover the actual cost of increasing the facility itself? I would suspect it may not. So what is the maximum capacity for all of our schemes? And at what point do we need to replace or renew or upgrade or change or go to something completely different? This kind of planning needs to go into the long-term financial plan if we are serious about growth for the district.
It seems to me you might want more information, A, but a workshop in a few months, B, perhaps identifying issues with each of the 4 systems, potential risks and potential opportunities.
I couldn't agree more. And the growth strategy will identify whether if a township was to grow by 20%, does our asset structure have, and CMWMS is one of them, have the capacity to grow with it, or do we need to then enhance it in some way? So all of that will fall out of that. I've noticed that some councils do a CWMS statement almost around as part of their annual business plan. I'm wondering, it's probably not at this point we do that, but once we do the asset management plans, it's probably a good time to pause then and to do a statement around CWMS. So a briefing and a workshop around that time would be good, and then a statement to the public about what's going on.
Can I just also add to that? And Mr. Mayor, you mentioned the 4 townships, but I think we need to look at the growth areas right through Wellington area in particular, and the state of the current systems in that area, because that potentially has huge
These are one of our
growth.
4 towns I'm mentioning, Councillor.
Well, yes, you did, but there's more than just Wellington in that area. It's right along that riverbank area that needs to be considered in that has systems in there that perhaps are a little antiquated now, that we need to look forward as it grows, as we go back
Councillor
north.
Arthur, we're
Within
getting closer.
the CWMS, if there's a new subdivision, they pay for it. If we've got to upgrade the pipes because they're too bad and it's a new area, they pay for it. And that's that part and parcel. But the thing that gets me, particularly about the CWMS, it's a lovely scheme because you're supposed to have kept a separate, it's supposed to be a non-profit thing. You can accumulate. Our balance, this is just some figures for you. The cost of the valuation of our CWMS scheme in total in 2007 was $4.5 million. It had an income of $226,000. Over a period of time, we upped it to now it is $16 million and an income of $1.2 million. Last year, we spent $580,000 on capital works plus the cost, and it still had a surplus of funds. According to the figures, there was back in, where were we, 2010, it owed the council about $4.5 million, and now it's actually running an accredited account. There's $850,000 in there. It builds up over a period of time. We've got a situation, and it hasn't been accounted for like that for a long time. You've got our next door neighbour, the Tatiara, who pays $350. They've got 4 schemes, the same as us, Wolseley, Nundulla, Bordertown and Keith. They pay $350 a year, and they've got $4.5 million sitting there for major works. Now, the way we're accumulating money, this next year, I would say, I haven't seen the budget for it yet, only roughly figures here, but you take your running costs out and the rest of the depreciation figures, and then there was a new thing brought in, I think 3 or 4 years ago, 1.5%, the risk factor. And if we go back sometimes, you know, like the scheme was being charged 6-7% interest, that was being charged to the scheme. Maybe we could have a real look at this thing and hold the figures, because one of the things that is, if you look at our rates compared to others, it is the cost of the add-ons, the jobs that we charge you for, your CWMS and your waste management. Our rate revenue is not much difference in our rate rate in the dollar is not much different. But it is the on charges, and that's where we've got to get smarter, we've got to get better, and we've got to be able to do it a lot more efficiently.
Okay, I'm near the end of what I think is a reasonable amount of time. The annual business plan and budget be endorsed for public consultation. Requirements of the Act. Thing, are you moving that way?
Correct.
Very kind of me. I reckon I saw a councillor around. But accept another question.
I'm seconding, and I just wanted to make one comment about the Serving Our Communities page and the 3 columns. They look odd justified. If they could be unjustified, it would look better.
Yeah, we'll raise that.
For you, Mayor.
Oh, okay.
We're going to change the font on a couple of things. We talked
Okay,
about
cool.
that this
That was the
morning.
only thing.
I've allowed
And I'm
us
happy to second it.
move back into some formal debate.
A question. And that is around the LRCIP round 3 we've obviously allocated $750,000 to roads, road upgrades, and then another 750 to be determined. My question is, which roads have we identified? When did we identify them? And when are we going to identify the 750?
That was on the list.
There's 4 roads, councillors.
4 roads were on a briefing.
I have seen
earlier.
the list, but I'm just wanting to know,
They are taken out of the list that was total.
and the 750 to be determined?
Next year.
Next year, through you, Mayor, because this LRCIP stage 3 doesn't start until January of next year, we've got a little bit of time to come back to you with some.
So when we go to public consultation on that, are you asking them for input?
We weren't specifically, but if it comes up, we can. We'll capture that information.
Thank you.
We're in debate, councillors. For Arthur, you
Yes, I'd just like to,
question or what have you got?
I'd like to query the employees' cost. At the start of last year, we were given a printout of all the employees and the total wages, which was $4.6 million. It has gone up to 4.956. Even though some of these positions weren't filled at the time, they still had a salary put in when they were working them out. We are now asking, according to this, for another $500,000 in wages, and it's been said that there's no increase in staff. So, where is this? And the second part of the question is, this is the base sum. This is not the actual full employee cost. Is that correct? That figure then has to have contingencies, your long service leave, holiday pay, all that sort of stuff. Correct?
For you, Mayor. No, that's the full cost, councillor. That's got all on costs onto it. So, and the explanation for that is, and I think I've said this before in the chamber, as the staffing weren't filled last year, they were taken out of the budget in budget 2 and 3, then they've come back in. And because we've also now got James in position in the finance team, we've also got Matt in the planning department. We had use of a consultant as well because of one of the staff members was, there was a vacancy there. So those 3 positions which we were using contractors have now come out. As you'll see, the next cost line, the materials and contractors, has got a decrease on page 24, councillor, where it's moved. So in one area, the employee costs have gone back to balance, apart from one new position, which is the pool position, which we've been have flagged with you for quite a while now, that will be one new position. But other than that, nothing's changed. And out of the materials contracts and other expenses, there's been a decrease because we've taken the contractors out. So it's really a rebalancing between contractors and back to staffing levels. So nothing has changed there.
Councillor, also, I think this is the first year where we go to 10% instead of 9.5 as the
I realise that.
super guarantee.
Yes.
So that's a minor, not a minor for some, but a minor effect. And I think the figures you quote are other figures from the budget reviews. This highlights, I think, a discussion here today about using first or second reviews versus the annual budget from last year.
Correct.
Next year.
We will change that.
While we are obliged to review it every quarter and adjust it, the relevant adjustment, the midterm should be an annual as a comparison.
Yes, it'll be, so through you, Matt, so from now on, you will see what the original budget was, then what the budget proposed in budget review 1 is, budget review 2, budget review 3, and then back to the point in time where we are now, which is really the setting of the budget for next year.
Right. Anyone else to speak for or against? Recommendation's been moved as I read it. Councillor Ling, you've happily closed. It's the shortest debate you've had. Very kind of you. I will put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Arthur, I need to know which way you for or against, Doug?
It's for consultation.
Yeah, I know. Well, you had your hand on the
There'll be
paperwork.
plenty of it.
Carried unanimously. Thank you, Ashley. We revert back to number 2 on my agenda. Anyway, statutory format budget review number 3. There's a recommendation there, councillors. If someone wants to move it, please. Discussion or... Councillor Roundtree, you're doing what?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Taylor, do you wish to speak or not?
Not yet.
So councillors, any questions around this number 3 review? Councillor Arthur, you're
I'm just
finding
getting back
something
there.
on that?
It's in the wrong spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just asked a question. Particularly interested to know about the actual grants. We've been inundated with grants, and some of them, like overlap, and looking at the other thing that's this is carried forward, this is carried forward. How many of these grants have we actually got in full, in part, and what is the time period for them?
Through you, Chair. 3. We are working out another way of presenting these, but there are some grants where we get paid in full and then we acquit them when the process is finished. There are some grants that have interim, especially those that go over multiple years. And we have some that don't need acquittal at all. We just need to meet milestones. So we have a variety of grants, and not all grants are the same in terms of either their reporting, the timeframes they cover, or the milestones you have to reach. So we need to develop, and you're right, we need to develop a way. There's accounting standards of how you account for grants. And so we need to do that. But we do have a system in place that recognises the grants. And if you've got a particular question about one of them, we can answer that, councillor. But generally, you try to match the revenue with the expenses in the year that they were, that they occurred. But it's not always neat.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because it can distort your annual report, and it always distorts our annual report, and it's never really been ported where we used to get on the 30th of June, maybe a $600,000 road grant from the Commonwealth Government, which had to be allocated in the 30th of June. And it was never going to be sent in the next 12 months, and it was never properly in there that 600,000 was a deferred liability. Now, surely where those amounts, and at the present moment, there's going to be quite a few of them looking through the list, and a considerable amount of money, they should be really listed as a deferred liability that we know are going to be spent next year or the year after. Because all of a sudden we could come out and James could be a great guy, and we've got a $3 million surplus this year. But we really haven't got a $3 million surplus. We've got a cash flow of plus 3 million, but we might have 3.5 million. We've got to spend of that next year. And that's what's happened lots of times.
Agree, through you, Chair. Agree. Grants are a bit of a moving feast, and the Commonwealth ones are particularly difficult. Sometimes the fags come in at the end of the financial year, and I've seen previous years where, first of all, they'll say has to be accounted for this year. 2 minutes later, you get a memo that says has to be accounted for next year. No, we've changed our mind. It's back to this financial year. So grants, sometimes it's a point in time, but the overarching principle is you try to match the revenue with the expenses in the year that they occurred and account for those that roll over into following years, and as you say, as a liability. And then when you bring them back into the picture, they become a revenue. So and as I said, each of the grants is very different in terms of its complexion. We need to be able to accommodate all of them. But they're a slippery beast.
Thank you.
You want to add anything, James? Or?
what we will do at the end of this year, we will identify what we call unexpended grants. And we're in the process of working that out. And we will put that money into an equity reserve so that we've got those funds in for future use. The same as what we've done this year in the budget. We've retained the $1.397 million in equity reserves, cash backed, and we'll do the same principles once we've identified the end of year results.
And also, that's fine, but also needs to be allocated what it's for. You know, specifically about, you know, I'm just looking here, you know, you've got 217,000 carryover, $127,000 carryover. Specifically, there's $1 million carryover and this is what it's for. There's 200 here, 170,000.
Needs to be divvied up, councillor.
So through you, Mayor, the grants are in the info doc every month about what's happening with them, where they're up to. So we'll make sure that that information is as precise as it can be, but they've been in the info doc for quite a while now.
But yeah, just, sorry to be a pain, but you know, the LAP, we've put through the LAP grants and some of them, it doesn't say, you know, they're a 3-year expenditure. We don't say if we get the whole lot once or we get little bits and pieces. So it just needs clarification, that's all.
Yep, and they do vary.
Okay, anyone else wish to say anything around this recommendation? You will close debate, councillor Roundtree.
Closed.
Thank you. Therefore, I put the recommendation as it reads. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimous. I didn't see you, councillor Hill. I'm sorry. Because I wasn't looking, Tracy. That's the problem. Number 3, perhaps. Is it? 3 is schedule of fees and charges for the forthcoming financial year. Perhaps, councillor, got any questions before we move? Councillor Roundtree.
16, under roads, just a question. We used to charge $30, so section 222 permits vehicles to be moved down the road. It was $30 before, and we're doing $20 a kilometre. That seems like a really large increase for people travelling between properties, I gather. Is that what it's for?
It's cropping.
Just for cropping, is
Cropping
it?
the country,
Oh, okay, so what, can someone explain what that is? I have no idea what that is.
yeah. Well, if you can lease land alongside your road
Road reserves.
off the
Road
council.
reserve.
Whereas before it was a minimal amount, a very small amount, and now it's a kilometre rate, which is fair.
I say you cut it for hay and then you use
Yeah,
it.
there's some.
Keep the weeds down, that's the principle. Rabbits.
But we used to do $30 and now we're doing it by a kilometre. But is that going to be is that a massive increase for
I
people?
wouldn't think so.
Okay.
Probably
Making a
the
lot
biggest
more out of
area used would be Macintosh Way, with the lovely lucerne growing there by the dairy farm. It's good fire break and
Director will add something to this conversation.
Through you, Mr Mayor, just to explain, so all over South Australia, there are unmade road reserves.
Yep.
Through people's farms.
Yeah.
They may not, over cliffs. And whatnot, and we need to provide permits for that. So people can conduct a business on it. So grazing sheep on it, cropping it is a business. So, you know, the townsfolk don't get free land to do things, so we have to charge somewhat because they're running a business, they're making some money from that. So that's the charge that has been determined, and it's across most councils.
And they've moved to the kilometre rate.
Other councils I've been at, it's per arable land, hectare of arable land, and then a different price for non-arable land. But we've come up with this now. But
Didn't want to be
it is fair and equitable.
start fielding questions about why it might have gone up when I didn't understand what it was about.
Yeah, and a whole audit of our unmade road reserves is required. So looking to do that. It's a huge project. I did it once before and it took about 6 months solid.
Oh, wow.
At another council, it is a massive job. So we have got that in our plans. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah. So my second question through you, Mayor, was around the exhibition fees. Just wanted clarification on what the 20% at the top means. You got 20%, then 80, 80, 150. This is on page or under Coorong District Council galleries. Just is that fee 20% something, or is it 20% of what the value of their paintings are, or
Commission on the sale. So each of these
On
paintings
sale.
is for sale.
Yep.
And for the administration of that, we take 20%.
And then what does the hallway $80 mean? Is that what it costs to hang it?
If people want to exhibit in the hallway.
They pay to do that as well. Right, yeah.
So Jens is next, then councillor Lang.
In reference to the previous question in regards unmade roads, we need to be fairly sensitive with this because I'm aware of some properties who will go from paying $30 to potentially hundreds of dollars, if not 1,000 or more. And they would be significantly unaware that this is coming through.
So it was bothering
We
me.
need to be very careful how we do this, and it's not their fault, it's just the way these properties are. And I'm loath to mention
How much does it cost you to lease land?
$30
Per
an
acre.
But if you left it, Mr Mayor, and they didn't touch that land and let it grow, wouldn't that then be a cost to council to have to go and manage that road reserve? So aren't you better
Council doesn't
keeping
manage
it?
road reserves.
So
No,
Jeff-
it's
so
not
it's-
ours.
so
Well, then
Jeff,
what happens to the fire risk? Who has the owner on the
Their responsibility.
better go over here to this director.
Why are
for a
you
second.
charging them for it?
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah,
When the audit of these unmade road reserves is conducted, we do a lot of public consultation and inform the community or the community that may be affected of this, and they have the option to take a permit for that land or not and pay accordingly or not. So there's a lot of communication with the affected.
Shouldn't it wait?
so councillors, I was part of a
Chicken and egg.
review of unmade road reserves about 25 years ago in one of my previous councils. I'll forewarn you that's full of traps. Yep. You'll have lots of people that'll claim that they have never grazed the road reserve next to them, ever. Remember that if you have a fence against a road reserve, it's your responsibility fully, so some will have the fence on the other side of the road reserve. They'll claim that the neighbours, well, then council will be forcing an issue. It's full of traps, little animals, arable, unarable, used for motorbikes, whatever. Just tread carefully, councillor Taylor.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry, councillor Lang.
Got a sore arm.
No, it's fine.
It's interesting. I did raise this point some time back with former staff and got told where to go.
You're still here.
Yeah, they're not. Anyway, that aside, I do recall some time ago reading a council policy which prohibited raising stock on roadside reserve.
No.
Not paper roads as we've got going across Cook's Plain, etc., where the original Gold Escort route was. But there was a policy. I don't know if that's been removed or is it still sitting there. It could
Wouldn't
be
be
counter
referring-
what's being proposed here.
Yeah, it wouldn't be referring to unmade road reserves. Therein is the difference. And the thing is, if this land is, through you, Mr Mayor, if this is going through a farmer's property, we need to have the permit to get the correct insurance for them. That bit strip of land is ours in the middle of a paddock. So we need to get the permits to then be able to ensure that.
And I did challenge why we weren't charging a lease fee for those lands. And there are numerous kilometres of them. But that aside, there was a policy, I can't remember the full strength of it, but it generally said you couldn't graze stock on roadside.
Unmade road reserve is different.
Have an influence on Native Vegetation Authority. We're going to councillor Taylor, please.
Through you, Mayor, I'd like to recommend that we hold off on this, on changing this until after the audit has been completed.
It's going to be over a year, but you still want to see it that way? Okay, I'm looking at councillor Bland, then councillor Jens again.
I think, just correct me if I'm wrong, those who've been around a while, is that I do believe we started to look at that around unmade roads and those unmade road reserves through property to decide what to do with them in relation to working with farmers who may be interested in acquiring some of that land. Now, so some of that work may in fact be in the system somewhere. Not that long ago, we talked about it in this chamber.
Yeah.
Easier to do.
I just asked the director a question about how much income we actually get from this and how many applications we get. Probably no surprise, not much and not many. So
We know there's more.
Through you, Mr Mayor, however, it is
Yes,
That land is through their property and there's no need documentation on that.
and by planning law, those roads need to exist, whether they're made or not.
People can access them through the middle of someone's paddock if
Exactly.
they want. We can't close them or gate them. They can't close them or gate them.
They are.
But if we issue a
They are,
permit,
Yeah.
They're closed.
yeah, they
Yeah.
can't officially.
I wasn't even allowed to have access to our own roads going across Cook Plain when I wanted to investigate them.
So it's,
Sorry, I'm going to stick with where I'm going, which is going to go with councillor Taylor. So I think you're foreshadowing a position recommendation. Is that what your question was?
Mhm.
Okay. Councillor Jens and councillor Roundtree.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll touch on roads, and then my next point is the reason why previous councils never went down this path aggressively was it was a very expensive thing to council. We weren't meeting costs when we started doing this in previous councils. So therefore, it was one that was let go. I understand the world has turned, and I understand that we have to be wary of litigation. Councillor's Bland comment, previous council was endeavouring to get rid of some of this ground because there's huge mileage on some properties. But it was never pursued aggressively to resolve it. My next question is, all facilities, we appear to be dictating to Taylor and Bententi and others what they're going to charge, because I can't see in black for some of it. So I'm presuming that we have consulted with them.
We certainly have. Yes, we've had several discussions.
That's fine, as long as we have, and I have that assurance, I'm happy with that.
Councillor Roundtree.
I would support what councillor Taylor's saying. I think if we haven't done the work, and then I also take on board what councillor Inch is saying too, if this is going to cost us more than the tiny bit we're getting in, why are we even going to consider doing it other than the liability issue? Which I know is important, but we're about to create ourselves a big job and a lot of cost, and we're going to surprise some of those farmers that councillor Inch just referred to, who have long roads, marked roads through their farms that I know, well, there's one on the back of ours, it is fenced and is grazed, and it is a marked public road, but because it is cropped, of course it's fenced, has to be fenced, otherwise the sheep would get out. You know, so I just think this will open up a bit of a landmine for those who are going to be affected in the hundreds of dollars who were only paying $30 before.
I should know the answer, but I don't.
You try the question, I'll go to councillor Bland.
If, when we do the review, some of the road, we will decide that we never need it, is it an option to lease it or give it to the farmer involved?
You would sell the land,
Yes.
but you need to go,
You can't
It's a
sell the
huge
land.
process.
Yes, you can, yes.
No.
there's a
you can't.
process
Stuff, yeah.
first.
It's
So
a
what you need
process.
to, what you need to do first is do an official road closure, which will cost about $8,000 to $10,000 for the surveying, etc. When that last time I did this, I struck up a deal with the surveyors because there was going to be so many that amount was reduced. Many of the farmers were very happy to do that because they just wanted that land, and that's the best way to go for them. The permits, I know we're just saying because of insurance, etc. That is a high risk to council. It can't be minimised.
In what way?
But
is
in
it
saying
financed?
if anything happens on that road, then we're liable.
So
completely liable.
when you say a road through you, man, when you say a road, are you
Piece
talking
of
about?
land which you wouldn't even recognise the road.
That's
So
right.
it's part of someone's farm. Point.
Where's
So
that
if
from?
someone had
Officially.
but if someone had a four-wheel motorbike accident
Didn't
on
affect
that
race and
particular
died that
piece, so
day.
you're saying that particular
fault.
piece is your fault, even though it's part of their whole paddock?
It's not part of their paddock, it's
Give a
our
fence to
road.
A classic example is Three Chain Road running across the back of a number of cattle properties. The roads are actually unfenced, and that's going to be part of our Coorong Trail. So people are going to be walking through gates into paddocks, possibly with bulls or anything else, and we have no protection.
I think that's to you, councillor.
Yes, all of this, this is where we got.
I'm
pretty-
expecting a councillor, sorry, to move a motion saying that the roads road rent or whatever will stay the same. That's what I'm going to let you.
That's not what I'm doing.
I know, but I'm expecting someone else to.
Did Councillor Taylor?
No, I'm
My-
trying.
Foreshadowing, she may do that.
My question here, though, or perhaps to be considered, is that we foreshadow in our documentation, even going out with the annual business plan, that we will be doing this review, and it may in fact be introduced by the end of the year at these charges. So rather than say that we won't do it for another year, and let's be honest, this council's only here for another
You
year.
are the most optimistic councillor today on everything you've
Well, I
talked
keep trying to sell off this
I know
land
you
for
are, but-
years now. I've got nowhere for exactly the same reason. It's
We might
expensive.
put a note in the plan that the council is going to be reviewing this.
I think if you start looking
And
about
these are
about
the
6 years
potential
ago, that
charges.
was when
You
the
never know what'll come
investigation was
out.
done.
That's right. Council usually offers the land for sale, but not always. Councillor Taylor, are you prepared, just so we can have a debate properly? Recommendation, but you want to have this with the road, whatever the item it was, staying the same as previously.
What was that, Mayor?
Road, whatever it is, I've lost the words. Permit to use road for business purposes. You want that to stay as was previously the year before?
Yes.
I'm happy
You want me to
second.
move them? Do
Are there
you want the
other-
words or do you?
Ashley, are you going to be fine with that one? Just as that's the one thing councillors have picked up. I'm going to take councillor Quammen as the seconder. I saw him out of the corner of my eye.
It's okay, as long as someone seconds, I don't care.
I'm trying to train myself to that, councillor. We're sort of into debate with a mover and a seconder. Councillor Quammen, you wish to add anything as a seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to speak before. I totally concur with what Councillor Taylor said and what I've heard around the room. And yes, it opens a can of worms as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's important that we do an audit and see where we're at, and then eventually get rid of this, what I call high risk asset eventually. And then in that time, as Councillor Bland points out too, we'll get the information out and a bit of consultation to the public what we intend to do. So I totally support going down this path. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Taylor?
So through you, Mayor, I fully understand the risk issues for this, but I think this is, we have absolutely no idea what kind of impact this has on particular farmers or users of the land. Therefore, I think it's pivotal that we get an audit done first to understand what that impact would be. And then ideally, if there is a high cost involved in turning that over to the landowner or whatever happens to that land, it would be ideal onto the landowner as their cost rather than ours. However,
Remember about 12 months ago, we completed one out on Emu Springs Road. They had a different arrangement with it, but the council's policy's always been the landowner pays all costs.
yes. So, and I know it's probably not, or it wasn't, I don't know where it sits in the planning for the next 12 months as in the to-do list, if you like, but it's obviously a matter of urgency. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared here. I'm disappointed that we didn't know about it before, rather than just to see it appear in part of the schedule of fees and charges. So,
Good to see you're all diligent in reading everything.
but that is, I do think it's important, and I do personally know a few farmers around about me, of course, who've got this type of land. And so they would find it it may not be a large cost to them, but I think it would be just another surprise. So,
Okay. You've nearly closed debate, but you haven't. So Councillor Arthur.
Yeah, just quickly, a couple of points. It's been, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago, we looked at this. Most of the land you don't even know is a road. There's no fences. You're not obliged to fence your property. There's no obligation for you to. So there's a lot of it out this way. I know one in particular we talked to, going back then, was quite indignant about it. He wasn't going to buy it because it was just a rocky outcrop that ran past his property and dead ended it. So and the other thing is, I don't think we know where most of them are. That's the other thing. And these have been historically part of farms for a long time.
Let's just probably stick to the agenda, which is the schedule of fees and charges, and not a debate about the roads themselves.
And I think what Deb's actually probably done is more of my thing was more along permits for, temporary putting a crop in. Because I know we have had a few people that have put crops in, and the council's actually come down and taken the dirt away and used it to do quarries with the crop. So we knew it was happening. So, like, it's not as if we didn't know it was happening, but I think it's a very, very big project to actually find out where the roads are for a start.
Councillor Yench to Councillor Lang, and then I'll pick, Bland, sorry, and then we're going to wind her up.
Further note of caution, and it is that where neighbours don't necessarily agree on this road is, we have obviously both sides, and we previously encountered conflict over who was going to acquire or potentially, or who's going to lease. The other thing being that there are a significant number of roads that run into the lakes and probably at the Coorong. And these pieces of land are potentially very valuable. We need to be very cautious on what we are prepared to give up, because some of this stuff is future reserves, etc. So
Correct. Councillors, I was on a council where Yench Road is north of Taylor Bend. We declined to shut the road because it was actually our only access to the river north of Taylor Bend. So yeah, Councillor Bland and then Councillor Rancher. We're sort of in debate, councillors.
I've got other questions. I've got other questions.
My question is to the mover and seconder as to whether or not, through you, Mr Mayor, we should consider getting a costing for someone to come in and do this.
Probably not as this agenda item, councillor.
Or maybe it needs to be agended at some point to get that costing.
Okay. Councillor Roundtree, you've got a question because we're nearly there.
No, mine's just continuing on. Not
Fees
about
and
this.
charges, we're getting away from.
I would like to say something else about other fees and charges when we've done with this.
No, this is all part of one omnibus motion, so you better ask
Okay,
right
all
now.
right, well, wait.
Try me, come on.
Hang on, Mr Mayor, we are not, this motion is
Councillor-
scheduling the whole fees and charges?
Mhm.
Well, according to that, it does. Adopts the 2021 schedule of fees and charges, led totally changed, updated as
Right,
received.
so I've got more questions before we do the whole
Amendment to the
thing.
permit used for road purposes.
We're trying to do.
No, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I have other questions I want to ask
No,
about it.
well,
Yeah, my
good.
word.
Yeah, he knows.
I think we've
Oh.
worn out our roads one.
But
Let's
what do
move
we-
on. What else would you like to ask?
Take that one individual motion.
Okay, so on resource hire, I just want clarification around the Giant Games. You've got it listed twice under community sporting club groups.
Or know what it is, councillor.
What page are you on, councillor?
Page 3
Page 3, councillors.
of that, or 20 of 92 on your scrolling pages. So it's listed twice. It's the same, it looks like exactly the same thing. It's listed twice under community sporting groups with CDC area, no charge upon receipt of bond. And then it's also listed under groups outside of Coorong, but two different fees, but for exactly the same thing. I just didn't understand that.
I think that's an error, councillor. No, it's not.
Makes no sense to me.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it may be if external people would like to hire, external to the district.
Yeah, that's on the groups outside the Coorong District Council.
Yeah.
Well, it's listed twice, one at $50 and one at $100.
So the intent would be outside of
Per-
council.
Yeah,
would
and
be-
per game or the whole lot.
So one's a complete set and one's per game,
There is different wording, complete set.
and per game. It's a big difference in price. For one game, I also get the whole lot. And-
What
It
is it? What game is it?
Well, it's all sorts, it's
Everything.
Connect Four, Jenga, checkers, Yahtzee,
Is that what it is? All right.
egg and spoon, sets, noughts and crosses, but it's 50 per game, or you get the whole lot for 100. It seems like if you only,
The hint there,
I
isn't
would
it?
have, I just would have made the per game smaller amount, 1/8 of the total.
Outside the area, councillor. Right, what other
Well, it's the
questions?
same for the, okay,
What other questions have you got? Sorry?
not community, all right.
You got other questions?
I have, but I don't want to hold you.
No. We're going to do every question, then I'll take the motion and put it.
I wanted to know about outdoor dining permits, annual fees. It's $175. Are we is an outdoor dining permit when we put that parklet in front of the Taylor and Bend Bakery? Is that considered an outdoor dining permit required for that?
No,
Included.
no, because that was us.
That's ours, you see.
Yes.
Well, what constitutes someone having an out? Is that like the Meningie Hotel who put a few seats out the front and they pay $175 a year for that?
But if they use our parklets on there, they don't have to pay.
They don't have to pay for the parklets?
So, be
Get
fair
them
to
on
say
the
that
parklets.
the park we have is on trial. We'll have to look, if that is ongoing, how we treat it. A variety of areas, legal, financial, a whole variety, all that areas.
That should have been done.
So what
Insurance,
does-
so that's be a fair comment.
Well, what does a person get for the $175?
Well,
Is
they
that
get
the
the right,
insurance,
they get the right to use public land.
the footpath area?
Council land.
Yeah,
I can't see the
therefore
difference
our
between.
insurance issues.
No,
Yeah,
It's
me
not out
either.
of, through you, Mayor, it's not out of
Parklands
step
came
with any other
after.
councils. That's pretty much what happens.
Seems onerous. I was surprised to see some of these costs, and I think, it's tough enough making a go of it in business out there. It's like, it's a footpath.
It's someone else's land, councillor. If you refer to your previous
It's
debate.
community
it was-
land of routes
Well, if you
councils
refer to your
paying.
previous debate around cropping or grazing of land. it's
I
technically
don't
no
agree with
different.
that either, so I'm
I
being
know, but
consistent.
Making the point.
I think
The
it's
public
ridiculous.
domain, yeah. Other questions, councillor?
I'll let someone else go.
Councillor Yench is next.
You, in relation to basically that subject, food vans. For the life of me, I couldn't find it. Previously, we have had concerns that
Food van should be on.
food vans that were from within the district got a level of preference, whereas food vans that came in because they're not paying rates within the district had a higher fee. But I've probably given it a bloke's look, but I can't see it.
food vans are food vans.
Page 3, we're told.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. My understanding is the
Page 3, Tracy.
not-for-profit is the no charge, and if a business is local without bricks and mortar, then there should be some fee charged.
It should be more, yes.
Yes, so it's maybe not necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the intent
Olivia.
was more for not-for-profit. If they bring in a mobile van, there's no charge, but if it's a business, then there is a charge.
And through you,
That's-
Mayor, there's been no
that's-
other changes on that one.
The charges are made by the state government anyway. They are sent
No.
through to us every year.
Not for
Well,
a
they did, they
mobile
have the
van,
last 2 years.
Us.
not for a mobile
Yeah,
van.
through you, Mr Mayor, please, following up with this. Yeah, I know that there are a number of these food vans that are run by local businesses and are utilised. I think that's worthwhile because these businesses pay rates for this district and they employ people. But again, as I said, it's for those that come in and do not necessarily contribute. It is difficult to justify for some of these people.
So that's not a category at the moment that's listed in this fees and charges, councillor.
It is. It is.
It is.
On page 3, street trading and mobile food vending.
Through you, Mayor, but it doesn't differentiate from where the food vendor came from. Councillor Yench's comment is that there should be a different fee structure for those from within the district to those without of the district. There's been no changes to what's been in previously to the fees and charges there, apart from a bit of CPI. So if you want to have a flex out of district vendors, we would need to put in another category.
Through you, Mayor, can I ask the Director of Community and Corporate, how many food vans we have currently on our books making use of spaces on the road?
I would need to, sorry, but my understanding is we haven't any.
So through you, Mayor, the only one that I know of is the one that's down at Salt Creek. Well, we would assume that they're not travelling great distance and therefore, yeah. So that's the only one I know of that is in use in the district. And therefore, I don't say, I would actually welcome personally any food vans to come into this district because it increases the potential for tourism, whether they live in the district or don't. I think it's not a problem which is currently occurring, so why are we trying to fix something which doesn't happen?
Sounds like we need a bit more work. Councillor Bland and Yench again.
Could I just make the comment that we have had the food van issues in the district here, where people came in and we had multiple complaints in Tailem and Bend from traders who were providing a similar service across the road. This one was also placed in the corner of the hospital area, so I won't going to go into the details of it. However, so we do need to identify that it does happen, not to the degree that it is. The other one that I see that I'm not sure how you would apply any of it, but mobile food vans that come in for community events. And we do bring them in all of our towns from anywhere we can get them, whether it's from coffee to whatever, pizzas or whatever. So,
Driver revival.
well, that's usually local, but the pizza van that comes in for a not-for-profit or the pizza van that comes in for an event,
Yep.
what are you charging? Because we haven't identified that. And if we're going to do a lot more events, then we
is
need to think
charged.
about it.
I think you're foreshadowing that.
I don't have a problem
Need
if
to
it's not
review the
expensive to
policy
pay
in
for
this
on that.
area, not necessarily the charging today.
There is a policy.
There is a policy
Might
and
need to
there is a
look at-
charge.
Policy variance that I think councillors are picking up is whether it's a so-called local business.
Through you-
Don't look at it very carefully.
But councillor Jensen, were you on the same point as councillor Bland?
Yes, I was. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Particularly with a out-of-district food van that's set up without permission, literally in the hospital car park here at Tailem Bend. And the hospital had huge problems trying to get rid of them. Council received a lot of flack because they perceived that it was our fault. So therefore, we went to great lengths to ensure that there were areas where these people could go that would not impact upon the local businesses. And that is important within the review that we should be doing. That we don't want to preclude them, but if they are going to be within a short distance of a business that pays rates and employs local people, we need to be protecting that rather than an interloper.
Competitive. Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Mayor. Anyone that parks a food van in wherever they'll do so anyway. They won't look at the schedule of fees. So if you're going to get an illegal food van parked, you'll get an illegal food van parked. That's a problem, no doubt, everywhere, not just here. That's got nothing to do with the schedule of fees, however. The whether or not, when you've got an event, for example, and let's say that take the street party as an example, where you've got an event, then there's a schedule worked out for how much you're going to charge certain vendors, which is different to this, because this, it's my understanding that this applies to I think it was one or two, or I only remember one or two. There was one at the ferry crossing at Wellington East, and there's one in the main street of Tailem Bend, which are designated mobile food service positions. That's what this is to do with. It's not to do with any transient one-off event scheduling fees, which is completely different and charged per event. So and how many applications have we had for someone to park in the main street of Tailem Bend? If they're knowing that there was going to be problems with competitive businesses, perhaps that should never have been approved in the first place. So you could look at removing it or changing it or putting the location somewhere else. But there's not, as far as I'm aware, there's not a review because there's not enough interest in the positioning of food vans in the district, as far as I'm aware. So we're just kind of going round
Around circles, we can do it two ways. Review, or one of you can move it as a notice on motion.
I think we've got a very strong policy on it.
Review the policy.
Yeah,
10
through you.
pages and it lays things
Councillor,
out very easy.
Going to wind it up any moment because we're stuck on road reserves and.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we have a policy on this that's due to come back for review. We're just prioritising the policies at the moment. So this is due to come back where from what I've read of it, we could do some things a bit differently and perhaps improve it somewhat. May I suggest that the fees and charges stay as they are because they've only gone up by CPI. So should something happen Friday, we can still charge. And then at the time of the policy, we can review the fees as well and update then. But at least between now and then, we can at least still charge should there be any applications.
Agreed. Any more questions? Crack at it.
There is one, sorry, Mr Mayor, I've just lost it now going between things. There's one in there that absolutely shocked me, and it's put in by the audit committee that council will now charge groups, sporting bodies and that, for extra bins for special events. What is this council? Money making, or do they look after the actual ratepayers?
So is that, councillor?
It's under,
Is in this schedule or not?
what do you call it? Waste management fees and green waste. I nearly fell off my chair when I read that.
You may, most sporting bodies would then ask for a waiver and I would waiver that fee.
Well, sorry, I wasn't.
Most sporting bodies would then ask for a waiver of that fee, and then there are many in here that I get an application to waiver, and I do.
But why do they have to? That's another encumbrance on the volunteers to do that. It's always been done before, like it's.
So councillor,
How do we, if we're going to charge, how do we charge the council for the number of bins and that we put out for the street party?
So
Don't tell me you didn't have extra bins out for the street party.
that was a council function. So,
Well,
so I think what we need to find out is why the audit committee recommended that. Because that seems to be where it's come from.
It's not that they recommended it,
Accepted the fees and charge.
They looked at it,
There's no recommendation.
so in here you can move an amendment or you can seek the part of the mover and the seconder if you'd like. I'm still on the motion.
Find it.
Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Matt, the audit committee don't recommend anything. The whole idea of the audit committee is to pass whatever it is that we've looked at onto the council in order for the council to accept or challenge. And that's why it's here. The audit committee might have read it, but at the same time, it's down to individual councillors to ask for changes. I presume is what Councillor Arthur is doing.
You're the mover.
Oh? Well, I'm the mover of this, yeah.
I'd like to move that.
As I said,
section
as
be removed from the
I
charge.
said, you can seek leave of the mover and the seconder if they want to have that removed.
Where is it, Matt?
What page is it on, councillor?
Yeah, I found it now. Here we go. Curbside waste.
6.
We have to go back to the
Page 6.
agenda for the.
Sorry.
That's right, I'm on page 6.
You've got to go back to the agenda for the audit committee under curbside waste, recycling, green organics collections policy review. It is the third item. No, it's not. It's the fourth. Community groups will now be charged for the supply and collection of additional mobile garbage bins in accordance with the council's fees and charges schedule. I haven't looked what the fees and charges schedule are for it. So does this mean when you have the...
Is there somewhere in the current debate in the fees and charges schedule you can find that charge?
I haven't looked through the fees and charges. I was too gobsmacked when I seen this. Obviously, the staff have put that in there, so it's probably in there somewhere, unless they haven't put it in.
How about I give everyone a 3-minute break while we go looking for this fee and charge in the schedule, please? 3 minutes, so I can grab a coffee.
It's only in the policy.
The major parade. Bins.
We didn't
There's
accept
community
them.
groups.
We didn't accept them at audit. What we said was we shouldn't be
Probably
accepting.
didn't notice it there.
Well, you do. Said that at audit committee, but it's a bit chicken and egg. We're getting to see something that has yet, and we said about a number of items that came to audit that we hadn't even had a chance to discuss it at council. It was clearly said, I think,
So, and we haven't stated that that's per day. In my view, we should be set up, or anyone could be set up for 6 weeks. Here or. So I'd like to, yes.
Solar panels who see set up.
Yes. They should be asking permission. They can't just do that. They should be asking permission. I've had the situation where we had just that, external people coming into town. I think it might have been Surf Life Saving, but it wasn't a not-for-profit. A rural town. The people that are collecting are paid. They're not volunteers, they were paid. And so they're out of town. So they didn't apply. I went down to the street and said, so it's in a township, and I worked with the local businesses as well, because they kind of need to know that someone's going to set up out the front of their business. They have no authority around it, but it's just, as part of my process, we let them know. And so they would tell us, have these people got a permit, because they're not displaying it. So then it kind of policed itself, so to speak. But anyway, nevertheless, I would agree that I'll put something there, if it's all right with councillors, to say if it's a not-for-profit local community organisation, there's a charge or a minimal charge, $10 or something, because there is admin involved.
I'd put per session.
Yes.
I've waited many for $80 a day, and it's there for a week and a half. That's probably all their profit and some more. So we've generally waived more. Eligible, so if they're there for 2 weeks, say they're running to Christmas, then $80 is probably palatable, but if it's per day, then makes no sense.
Yeah, Mayor, we've always been advised in the past, say the RSL sets up before Anzac Day, the street party the Christmas parade will set up at various times of the year. We've always been advised to just write a letter. And usually the CEO, we've never been charged, and I don't think that the Christmas parade has ever been either. So maybe perhaps it just needs, yeah, as you say, put in writing. I'd accept that if you want to put that up there on the.
Yeah, our view is if it's in this fees and charges, then that's what we will do, and it won't have to go to the CEO to get waived. So we're just there as well if we're going to get the end result.
So through you, Mayor, is that the same then for, let's say, things such as the hire of the town hall? Is that in there as well already? Because I can't scroll through the whole thing. But.
The town hall speaks to. Oh, sorry, Bridget.
You could almost write the fees and charges, and we do them completely. Some of them are very old. I'm just talking to councillor Planning, where $3 for the swimming pool has been $3 for the swimming pool for about 40 years. So we're due to have a really good look at these. We've only done CPI for most of them this year. But you could almost look at it and say that they only apply to commercial activities rather than not-for-profits, because I spend my life waiving not-for-profits. But we may think of another way of actually working this fees and charges out and how they're presented to the public. Consultation, and it will be before next budget session, which is June of next year. So they are due for a complete overhaul. Some of them are very old.
Right along.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm just waiting, sorry. Councillor Taylor's,
So
you got a question?
through you, Mayor, the charge which Councillor Arthur was referring to, has anybody found it yet in this document?
Cannot find it.
So it's not in this list. So it
Must have been a thought bubble.
was a policy position, but that hasn't been, as I understand it, adopted by council. Coming to next meeting. So we'd be precipitous to do it now and put it in, and we'd be, by the way, we're not charging it this year, the way I see it, council.
So through you, Mayor, it's exactly the same situation. So if you've got, let's say, Murray Bridge Imperials want to go out to Tintinara and hire the whole facility for something blah, blah, it is then a cost to council for providing the extra bins. So there's a for-profit angle of this and a not-for-profit angle of
Probably
this.
illustrates why the waiver is a better direction, because rather than trying to prescribe every possibility, the CEO can, to a degree, read between the lines of the applicant. Otherwise, you try and prescribe everything, you'll never win.
Mm.
You're going to close debate, councillor.
Yes, please.
Okay, you've had a fairly interesting time with that one, and apart from deferring anything around permits to use roads for business purposes, the rest of it will.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, sorry,
It is closed, councillor.
No, there's just one thing, e-waste. We've got charges in here for e-waste. Now, e-waste has always been, because it's Commonwealth legislation where they paid the fee and
Levy
they buy
somewhere.
the thing.
Right.
It is supposed to go back through the process. We put it in our trailers down at Tindy and whatever.
I know,
Nothing.
councillor, I really don't. Hasn't changed from last year, councillor, so it's another area for review.
Waste also is some of the electronics.
Well,
Yeah, e-waste is separate to
Really
computer
hard.
equipment.
Washing machines are not e-waste.
well, they are nowadays. We have closed.
Okay.
Closed. So, motion is as you see it. I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. James, I'm disappointed you're not voting. You're sitting out in the chambers. We must have one more agenda item. Is that right? Where's it gone? Page 20, councillors elected representation review submissions report. There is a recommendation that the council receive and note the elected representation review submissions report. Councillor Jens, you're moving
Yes,
that way.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And you will note, councillors, that it comes up for the next decision of this process on the 29th. Normal ordinary council meeting. You're a seconder. Councillor Arthur was first, just. Was she?
Councillor Hill got in first then.
No, she didn't, because I didn't pick her, but I see she's back there. Any debate?
Just one question to the CEO. Have we heard back from our coordinator regarding his approach to the Electoral Commission, whether we can put this through by October? See, now the legislation has passed, so one would have thought there would be no problem.
So I haven't, through you, Mayor, I haven't heard back from Craig regarding the legislation going through, but I have no doubt that he'll be trying as hard to see if there's some transitional arrangements in place, and we'll know that before we have to come back to you in 2 weeks' time.
At least we know that it's through Parliament. That's one thing we do know. Councillor Taylor, a question?
Question, Mayor. How are we pushing this out to the ratepayers and?
Not at all yet. You're simply receiving, noting it at the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Please close. Closed. Put the motion, the recommendation is as it reads, the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. I think that's the end of the business of the meeting. Is that right? For your attendance, the ordinary meeting is on the 29th, 2 Tuesdays away. Anything else in particular before then?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, could I just ask the CEO, there is a investigation at the present moment of the Native Vegetation Act. 5th of June, will we be putting a submission in regarding, as part of our submission is the actual clearing of roads, which 18 months ago, down with talking about a project of